Shabbat Shalom, everyone! It's Friday again, and this time it's Parashat Chukat. Parashat Chukat is full of many famous pieces of Jewish tradition, starting with the red heifer, the Parah Adumah, the cow that, when sacrificed and ground down to its ashes, has the power of, to a certain degree, reversing the impurity of death and cleansing people. And we continue on to many different stories of famous stories of the Jews in the desert complaining about not having enough food and not having enough water. We find the death of Miriam, we find the death of Aaron, and we end the parasha with the beginning of the conquest of the east bank of the Jordan River, the area that is modern-day Jordan, of the different kingdoms of the Sichon and the areas there, and there's much to talk about that another time. But hidden in the middle of the parasha is, I think, one of the most tragic stories in the Tanakh. A story that I would actually like to focus in on a bit more, because I think it holds a very truthful message, which we don't focus enough on, I think, in our tradition. In Shlishi, the third part of the parasha, we have the famous story of Moshe Rabbeinu being told, Moses is told to go and take his staff, together with Aaron, and to go and bring forth water for the people. As it says, Kach et hamate v'hakel et ha'eda ata v'Aaron achicha v'dibartem el hasela le'enehem v'natan meimah. Speak to the rock, and it shall give forth water. And you shall draw forth water from the rock, and that will give water to the people. Now, famously, at the very beginning of the story of the Jewish people in the desert, the Jewish people likewise had no water, and Moses needed to go to the rock, and he needed to strike the rock with his staff, and this time he needed to speak to the rock, holding his staff, but nonetheless speak to the rock, and that will bring forth water. And unfortunately, Moshe Rabbeinu does not follow through with this. They gather everyone together. We're going to bring water from this rock. And Moses struck the rock twice. And many waters came out, and everyone drank. So maybe it's not exactly what God commanded. He commanded to speak at the rock, maybe give some sort of speech, give some sort of encouragement, and instead he struck the rock in many ways, going back to the modus operandi of the beginning of the desert, and waters still come forth. Then there is a break. In the Tanakh, you'll often find in the text itself there are gaps, and these gaps are pauses on one hand, but on the other hand, sometimes they hold within them the silence in the gaps, the God of the gaps, as they like to say. The silence in the gaps is so loud, and it screams so much. In this gap, we have the response of God, and then it flows forth from the text. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe ve'el Aaron. And God said to Moses and Aaron, Yan lo he'emantem bi, since you did not trust me, lahakdisheni le'enei bnei Israel, to give honor and to be a demonstration of my kedusha for the Jewish people. Lachen lo taviu et hakahal hazeh el haaretz asher natati lachem. You guys are, in the words of the orange man, you're fired, right? You're gone. You are no longer the leaders of the Jewish people. You will not bring them into the land of Israel. Hem amei meriva. These are the waters of fighting. Asher ravu bnei Israel et Adonai vayikadesh ba, where the Jewish people fought God. What? Moses is not going to go into the land of Israel? Why? Fantastically, the sages and the rabbis throughout the ages have tried to understand what exactly was this great sin that Moses is punished for in such a harsh way. If you think about it, this whole story starts with Moses. Sefer Shemot, the story of the Jewish people, you could even argue that Sefer Bereshit is the build-up to the history of the Jewish people until they get to the land of Egypt. And then Sefer Shemot starts with the hero of the story is Moshe Rabbeinu. We even literally learn of his birth and him being saved and his whole journey through the desert and running away from Pharaoh and coming back, and the prince of Egypt is Moses. Moses takes the Jewish people out of the land of Egypt and to the land of Israel. That's the whole point. He was sent by God to take them out and to take them in. And now, because of one little mess up, because he didn't speak to the rock, he hit the rock. Enough. Goodbye. Goodbye. This hero's story just comes crashing down. And famously, the Shadal, a very famous commentator, says that he collected from all the different sources something like 20 reasons that are given to what exactly did Moses do wrong, what exactly was Moshe Rabbeinu's chet. And famously, I've been told by many of my teachers, if a question has 20 answers, that means that really the question is much, much stronger than any of the answers. The more answers the question has, the stronger the question is. The text doesn't say what Moses did. Now we can try and imply he was supposed to do X and he did it, but what was the big deal? That is not said. But nonetheless, the story of Moshe Rabbeinu ends at the very end of the Chumash, the final chapter of Dvarim. Moshe Rabbeinu goes up to the mountain where he's going to die. He looks over the land of Israel. He sees what he's not going to get, and he dies there. He's at least allowed to be shown exactly what the Jewish people are going to receive. And according to tradition, he's even given some sort of vision of history as a whole for all time. And yet his story ends. If I was giving out film critiques and this was the film, this film would receive 1 star. This is bad literature. What are you talking about? You don't kill off the hero for no good reason. Maybe if you have some sort of major climax where, I don't know, he fails at the last moment or he chooses to sacrifice himself, fine. But in this case, it's just so banal. On a technicality, Moshe Rabbeinu is fired. Now, there are explanations that maybe seem to jive more, seem to give us a more deeper understanding. The explanation that I personally love is that the idea is that Moshe Rabbeinu was using the old techniques instead of the new techniques. This was a new generation. You can't use sticks anymore. You have to use speech. You have to persuade. You need a different type of leadership, a leadership of inspiration, less a leadership of fear. These aren't slaves that you can strike. These are people that you need to rouse up into battle. Say there. Fine. There are lots of explanations that can be really educational. But nonetheless, that's not what's written. It still is a hole in the plot that we try to fill, but nonetheless, the hole speaks. That hole in the text speaks volumes. What's going on? The message that I take from this is, first of all, putting aside the fact that this proves that this isn't fiction, because no one would write fiction like this, but putting that aside, life is fickle. Mistakes happen, and then you can't fix them easily. Even great leaders can be caught with their hand in the cookie jar. Even great leaders, and Chas v'Chalila, Moshe Rabbeinu was not caught here doing anything immoral, but even the slightest mistakes can cost you so much. If a surgeon slips when doing open heart surgery, even if it was not on purpose, that can still have ramifications for the patient for their whole life. Moshe Rabbeinu is held to an extremely high standard. As the Chazal say, God treats his closest with a hair's breadth. If you're off by a hair's breadth, then there are great ramifications. The world that we live in, the situation that we live in, is very much out of our control. Even Moshe Rabbeinu, you could argue, maybe the closest a human ever got to perfection, as the Torah itself describes, even they mess up. Even they face the consequences. En tzaddik ba'aretz asher yaseh tov v'lo yichita. Everyone is human. Moshe Rabbeinu is human, and humans make mistakes, and mistakes have consequences. You need to pay the price, and Moshe Rabbeinu pays the price. He's fired. The goal, the mission, is bigger than the human. The human is always going to be human, and there is always someone to replace you. Moshe Rabbeinu is replaceable. Every human being is replaceable. Everyone has a role to play, but they also have consequences. No, nothing is covered up. You would expect if anyone would get a pass, it would be Moshe Rabbeinu, and yet Moshe Rabbeinu does not get a pass. And that, ironically, even though it seems to be so depressing, seems to be so harsh, seems to be so disillusioning, if that's even a word, I think it gives us a bit of hope. Because if Moshe Rabbeinu sinned, and Moshe Rabbeinu messed up, and yet he's still Moshe Rabbeinu, then even when we mess up, we still have all of the good as well. We still are all of the benefits. We still have the ability to continue on. And Moshe Rabbeinu, despite being told this, continues on for another whole book of the Tanakh, the whole of book of Dvarim. Moshe Rabbeinu still has a job to do. He knows he's not going into the land of Israel, but he still does his job because he recognizes that, fine, that's not for me. This is for me. I need to do my job. So with all of these different complex swarms of ideas and emotions and reflections that are all hiding within this gap in the text, I would like to propose that we take this parasha as a viewpoint, there's a word that I'm looking for that doesn't come to mind, as some sort of portal into the reality that we face, and recognize that, Baruch Hashem, God deals with us as humans. Humans make mistakes. Mistakes have consequences. But human beings are made to make mistakes. And Moshe Rabbeinu was made to make mistakes as well. And if he sinned, and we'll see, he very much does tshuva for it as well. That's part of the Vayitchanan el Hashem and so on and so forth. Nonetheless, the consequences are still there. And we too can sin, can make mistakes, have consequences, and still continue and carry on. Shabbat Shalom.